At the end of Houston Smith's autobiography, Tales of Wonder, I really strongly recommend that book if you're interested in one of the great thinkers and who played a very large part in introducing Eastern spiritual thought to the West. So at the end of his autobiography, he mentioned a story of his friend Anne Joagri that happened to her as a little girl when she was in Michigan. And it's always seemed to me to be a beautiful portrayal of the merging between our spirit of inquiry and spirit itself. So let me read. In summer, she would lie on a wooden raft, anchored in the bay, listening to the waters lapping, drowsy in the warm sunshine. The warm day, the clear northern light, and the water's gentle motion together worked a semi-hypnotic effect. Then suddenly Anne would snap alert and feel intensely alive, or rather everything was alive, and that she was part of it. The rocks, the rowboats on the shore, the water itself, everything seemed like it was pulsating with a kind of energy. She found she could put questions to the experience. What is my role in all this, she asked. I want to know, she whispered. Show me. The rocks, the trees, the water, all in silent chorus answered. Not in words, of course. That her wanting to know just that was her part of the pulsating landscape. Creation delights in the recognition of itself, is how she would later put it. So in looking at myself and how that affected me, I think a big part of it was the sense of, the childhood innocence and the wonder, fitting that Tales of Wonder was the name of title of his autobiography. And that there's childhood wonder, the innocence of childhood wonder in the face of the vast, deep mystery of creation. And so I'm thinking of that spirit of nature, communicating itself to her, communicating to her innocence, to her open heart. And sometimes it seems like, all that we'll have experiences where we kind of realize that all that really matters is a soft, open heart. That's willing to immerse ourselves or immerse itself in the wonder of being, the courage to confront our fears, and the openness to receive joy, and the spontaneity of nature. I'm also reminded of that when I'm sitting outside, I'll read or write poetry or something outside, and I live out in the woods, so the nature's very alive, and sometimes I feel it pulsating. And my dog Bruno, he's a lab. He's a very sweet dog, and he'll sit there with me, and he's so noble, the way he just sits there and he puts his nose in the air and he's sniffing, and there's I don't know if you're a dog lover, you have had the experience of your dog kind of smiles, a kind of noble smile where they're just content, and he feels so at home. Sometimes kids can because he's a great kid dog. My kids are older now, but a few years ago, when my son Danny was 13, he had to write a paper, and one of the things he wanted to write about was Bruno. And so he said, my dad's lab, Bruno, is such a loving dog. He's so loving that whenever he's around, everybody feels love. And it's such a direct, simple way to put it. But the Spirit just kind of comes, because Bruno is that way with the kids and with me and with everybody. It reminds me of one of Ram Dass's friends. You know, Ram Dass, his guru, he died about 50 years ago now, 45 years ago. One of his friends was reflecting on his presence, on Maharaji, Ram Dass's guru's presence. And he said, you know, it wasn't so amazing that he seemed to love everybody, because he's known as one of the great saints in all of India. But what was amazing was that when I was with him in his presence, I loved everybody. So Ram Dass has a practice that he talks about in some of his later books, where just I am loving awareness. It's his way of identifying with his teacher, that his teacher was so deeply embodied that presence of loving awareness that it showed, you know. So my intuitive sense of that is that when we really open ourselves, we open our heart and are free, feel that freedom to feel the life force freely flowing through us. It's you know, it's obvious that the warm currents flowing inside, that's what happiness is. It's not from the outside or seeking happiness in objective accomplishments or objective experience, really, but it's that free interplay of our inner and outer world. And the spiritual life only takes off when there's a harmonious and caring relationship between that, the inner and the outer. It's how we begin to slowly, at least in my case anyway, we slowly build the intuition that we are actually all the same being. So in the practice of meditation, of course, you know, for many years, we'll hear that just allow your experience to be as it is. Thoughts and feelings, just let them arise, let them pass away without clinging to them. But I think this practice of being open with that childhood innocence, that childlike innocence that we have, even though we can reawaken it, and even more deeply cultivate it in our later years, as a way of realizing the benefits of not struggling with our thoughts or feelings, because they do just arise on their own and they pass away on their own. And try to keep the deeper questions in mind. You know, like, how was I born? How did I come to be born? We think we were born. Were we really born? Who are we really? Who am I really? What's real? What's unreal? You know, there's a lot of talk in spiritual circles about don't get stuck in asking why. I have kind of a different approach to that. I think I'll tell people, well, it's fine to ask why. We start by engaging our thinking mind. If we're real serious and we're earnest in our pursuit of the truth, and we really want to know from the depths of our being, the depths of our life, what is true, when we know there's no answers, we'll come to that realization through our own experience, not because other people tell us. Through our own experience, we'll see that the answers aren't there in the thinking mind by itself. The thinking mind is a tool we can use to awaken our deeper inquiry. So I say it's fine to ask why. What good comes from opposing the question? Only don't get stuck in the ghost-like thoughts of why. In other words, trying to answer the question through the confinement of the thinking mind. So we can learn like Anne as a child, or like my child, Danny. We can learn to ask from our depth of being. In thinking mind can be an introduction to that. But ask from our lungs, breathing spirit, from our heart, beating currents of joy, from our seeing ourself and the big self, not the small self that's confined in the thinking mind, the big self with a capital S. And ask from our hearing silence, hearing itself. This is how we learn to bring the depths of our being from the depths of life itself into a merging of our inner and outer life. So we learn to be the whole of life, rather than getting stuck in our questioning. I think it was one teacher, I don't remember who, he said, rather than asking from the mind, lay your head down on the lap of the beloved, the earth or Mother Earth, and drift off into the answer. Where else could the answer of aliveness be?